So I know we're a couple weeks removed already from the Game Awards, but this has really been weighing on my mind. And we're going totally off script here, but did Elden Ring really deserve Game of the Year? Now, there's obviously people on both sides of this equation here. A lot of people truly believe God of War got robbed. They should have won it, hands down. And obviously, there's plenty of people who believe that Elden Ring rightfully won. Before we get into any of it, I do want to congratulate every single one of the award winners. It's an amazing accomplishment. There's so many hours that go into these games. There's so much hard work, so much time, so much effort. Months, hours, years spent on these games. Specifically want to give a big congratulations to Bill Clinton. Don't know if we'd be here without you. Put in a lot of hard work. And just real big ups to him. So with all of those congratulations out of the way now, I want to get back to the main topic of this video, more so comparing God of War and Elden Ring, and if Elden Ring truly did deserve to win Game of the Year. Now, it was at the end of the day between those two games. I don't think any of us here were fooled for a second that Horizon or Stray or any of these other nominees had a real chance. They were good games, but they're just severely overshadowed by these two juggernauts. My personal opinion, before everything was said and done, before the awards were given out, I was probably leaning more towards God of War winning. I've played both games, I've beaten both games. Elden Ring I've beaten about 4 or 5 times, and they're both just phenomenal games. My big thing is I just have a soft spot for God of War, which was why I was leaning more towards that way. Played every single game, beaten every single game. I even got my dad to play the games and beat the games, and he absolutely loved them. That being said, I was not shocked in the slightest bit that Elden Ring won. I really didn't even have a horse in the race outside of that soft spot that I already mentioned, simply because I knew this was going to go either way. And as the Game Awards were unfolding, God of War continued to rack up award after award. I was really starting to believe, maybe God of War will edge this out at the end of the day. They won a lot of awards that contribute to what goes into the Game of the Year. And that's a lot of people's arguments. How do you win Best Narrative? How do you win Best Performance? How do you win all these awards, but not win Game of the Year? Well, it happens. We just witnessed it. And from a comparison standpoint, I think what gave Elden Ring the edge at the end of it all was the kind of game it is. Now, obviously, that's a very vague answer, but let's compare the two. With God of War, you have your pretty typical formulaic RPG storytelling where you play as your hero, in this case Kratos, and you're going through hitting your plot points. You're doing the story as it unfolds before you. You're occasionally exploring, you're doing some side stuff here and there, but for the most part, you're staying to the beaten path. You're beating the bosses when you need to beat the bosses. You're doing the story points when you need to do the story points. You're watching these beautiful cinematic cutscenes. And it works. It works tremendously well for God of War. That's how the majority of these games have been. Obviously, it's been changed a little bit, just going from the first 3 to the 2 most recent games, God of War 2018 and now God of War Ragnarok. And while this formula works really, really, really well for the God of War games and most games in general, it does hinder the game to a degree. You do tend to hit some points of repetitiveness, you hit some monotony, because realistically, just follow the story, follow the way markers, follow where it wants you to go. You'll end up running into the boss, you'll beat the boss, you'll continue the story, so on and so on. And while many people do enjoy games like that, especially when they're a game of this magnitude where it has beautiful storytelling, beautiful cutscenes, amazing combat, a lot of homages to even the previous game from 2018 where it almost seemingly starts the same as the 2018 title, where in the very beginning you encounter Baldur, and then in the very beginning of this game and of Ragnarok you encounter Thor. It's played out very similarly, and it works for this game. The storytelling is really strong. The world development is just phenomenal. The character development is amazing.
You know who I am?
No.
But at the end of the day, it's your pretty stereotypical RPG storytelling game. And I feel like we're at a point nowadays where people don't want as much of that as they used to. They don't want the hand-holding. They don't want to be put into a hallway and being told exactly where to go and how to get there and what to do. They don't like puzzle hints. Now, I know it's not prominent in God of War, but it is there, especially the hallway part. I know that sounds terrible. There's been plenty of games that have been memed to hell and back. Take Final Fantasy 13, for example, over this hallway simulator thing. And it's a little bit overblown because that's just the way some of these games are intended to function. But this is the point where Elden Ring enters the picture. It has taken everything from previous From Software titles, but built upon it in a degree that I don't think anybody in their right mind ever expected From Software to go. Elden Ring is a game that gives you total freedom from the very beginning, even comparing it to the previous titles in the Soulsborne series. From Dark Souls 1 through 3 to Demon's Souls to Bloodborne to Sekiro. Similar to how I described God of War and other RPG storytelling games, those games followed a formula as well, where it was this dungeon crawling with high difficulty, but it was pretty linear. You were pointing in a direction and you pretty much knew where to go. It wasn't very hand-holdy by any means. I mean, they didn't give you hints on puzzles or anything like that other than checking the ground for the notes that people would leave you. But even those majority of the time were some of the most unhelpful things you could ever come across. And I know we're all aware of how difficult the combat can be and how punishing it can be, especially when you die and die multiple times in a row. And those are just a small fraction of the reasons why the Soulsborne series grew such a prominent following after so many years. Not including the lore, the story, things of that nature. I know people like to argue that there's no story in those games, but there is, and it's a very deep, very complex, and very good story. And these are the aspects that Elden Ring held onto from all the previous titles, but built upon them with the idea of total freedom in mind. And you might be asking yourself, Average, what do you mean by total freedom in mind? Look at the game as a whole. It has maintained that standard dungeon crawling linear path that you can follow as every other Soulsborne entry. You can go straight from point A to B to C all the way through Z without missing a step the whole way through the game if you really wanted to. After that initial boss fight that you can win, but you're technically supposed to lose. But they built an entire open world around that to where you can go to point A, then you can jump to point B3, then go back to point C with nothing inhibiting you in between any of those. Now we compare that to other open world games that are out there. Breath of the Wild is a widely popular game. It's a great game. But if you notice and you compare the two open worlds, there are things in Breath of the Wild that will inhibit you from being able to explore the totality of the map right from the beginning, unlike Elden Ring. Whether you try to climb a mountain but don't have enough stamina, you need the paraglider just to leave the beginning area of the map. You need clothing that fits certain elements of the game, otherwise you're just going to die because you're too hot or too cold. Things of that nature inhibit you from being able to explore the map to its entirety until you are able to get those things. While Elden Ring and the developers of the game opted to take the route that the only thing that can inhibit you in the entirety of the game is yourself and your perseverance or lack thereof. You can go from that first initial boss fight, whether you win or lose, and go straight to an endgame area right away with nothing in between, no stops, no fights, nothing. And that's why Elden Ring, as just a world, has surpassed, I think, everybody's expectations. Now, is that enough alone to make the game Game of the Year? Probably not. But there's so much more to this game than how the world was developed. The game as a whole was polished down to a fine detail. There are so many things in there, big and small, for you to see, explore, and even miss. From secret walls that you have to hit 100 times for it to finally come down, to a chest that you open and will transport you to a completely different part of the map that you're probably not prepared for. To a story that, while yes, tends to be hidden in the deep, deep lore of the game, is still extremely deep and meaningful and well told, all things considered. And Elden Ring is a game that has cutscenes that are very few and far between, but will still have cinematic moments to leave you in awe. From Radon crashing in from the sky after disappearing from the map, to watching Godfrey become Hoaraloo. The whole social media world was put into a chokehold by Elden Ring, from viral videos to viral tweets to death compilations of just moments of this game that were blowing everybody's mind. And even to this day, you will still get some viral videos, and it's been many, many months since the game's release. Yes, God of War did have moments like that, but not even close to the degree that Elden Ring had, and the impact it had on not only its own community of FromSoft fans, but the gaming community as a whole. And at the end of the day, I think that might be the major catalyst as to why Elden Ring won Game of the Year. Aside from being a well-built game, aside from the amazing soundtrack that you're hearing now, aside from the world being so dense and so complete, where God of War stuck to their formula and played to their strengths in order to put out what is a phenomenal game that would have absolutely deserved Game of the Year had it won. Elden Ring broke the formula that made From Software and the other Soulsborne games a major success already, and in its place created a new one that only enhanced the player experience and shattered the gaming community and their expectations entirely, and in turn laid a new foundation of what gamers should expect from developers in the future, while at the same time establishing a new standard that game developers will need to meet in order to keep up with games like these in the future. So to answer the question posed at the beginning of the video, did Elden Ring really deserve Game of the Year? The answers are simple: yeah. This is Average at Best. Thanks for taking the time to hear my thoughts, and I hope to see you in the next video.